Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of the Nictalksball podcast. I hope everybody is well today. And today's episode is going to be about analysing the striker markets. We seem to be hearing a lot of transfer rumours about clubs being after a number 9, yet it seems like for the elite clubs only one deal has actually materialised yet. So we'll be taking a little bit of a look at that, and we'll have a look at some Club World Cup results as well as, of course, some transfer rumours at the end. Now, first of all, in terms of the Club World Cup results, yesterday we saw Juventus beat Wydad 4-1 with an own goal quite early on, a brace from Kenan Yildiz, and then a Dusan Vlahovic penalty towards the end. Juventus, I think that scoreline kind of flatters Juventus. I think at the back they were a bit shaky, and it was kind of the Kenan Yildiz show, which is... He's an exceptional player. If you haven't seen him play, I'd highly recommend it. Very fun, although I think his future is more centrally behind a striker rather than... It's sort of in a similar way to Dybala, rather than playing off the wing, because he's oddly tall. I might write a Substack piece about him, because he is a really, really interesting player. And this morning, at 2 a.m, I was probably the only person that's not a Manchester City fan that was actually watching this. I watched Manchester City beat Al Ain 6-0. It's kind of a weird game. The start was oddly competitive. Gundogan scored a beautiful sort of goal, so a dinked cross towards the back post for Haaland, but it just kind of sailed over the goalkeeper's head. And then Claudio Echeverri sort of had a free kick on the right side of the box, which he sort of whipped over. The wall was terrible, and that beat the goalkeeper as well. Very interesting, the commentators kept making a point that Rui Patricio was definitely an Al Ain player. He was just not included. I think the coach felt like he wanted to respect the goalkeeper that had brought them into the competition, and play him. And sort of the camera kept sort of panning into him every time Al Ain conceded, with this sort of grimace on his face, which I thought was quite interesting. And then after the break, they went in 3-0 up at the break thanks to a Haaland penalty. I thought Haaland again he was kind of snatching at chances in this game, similar to the game against Wydad, where I thought they were snatching at chances as well. He was snatching at chances, I should say. So maybe a bit rusty, but they obviously faced Juventus in their last group game. Can't remember what day that is. It might be Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember, but that will be definitely a game to watch out for, and it's on at a good time. Thankfully, it's at 8 o'clock, not a 2 a.m. fixture. Anyway, let's move on to having a look at some strikers. First up, this is not my favourite of the list. I've kind of separated into the 3 elite strikers that are on the market right now, and then I've also got some names down to mention, who I think are still interesting options, but they're just not top level guys. Number 1, this is probably this is my pick. This is my sane pick. This is the pick that if my club, Arsenal Football Club, wheeled him through the door, I'd be like, okay, I see the vision here. I'm happy with this. But actually, let's take a look at the clubs who are after a striker. So obviously we've got Arsenal. Everybody is reporting that Arsenal are after a striker. Everybody's and their dad are saying sort of Arsenal need a striker to win the league, which I don't think is true. Chelsea are probably after a striker this summer. Who else are there? Manchester United would probably like a striker. Liverpool, if Darwin Núñez leaves, would probably like a striker. Who else have we got? PSG maybe potentially interested, but I think that's maybe a bit further down, and maybe Barcelona. So there's about 6 clubs. I think they want varying profiles, and they've got varying amounts of money to spend, which is always interesting. But first up, we've got Benjamin Sesko. Now, I wrote a piece about him on my Substack, so if you're looking for a more detailed overview, and I won't speak a lot about Sesko because, like I say, I've already written something about him, and I think I've spoken quite a bit about him as well. He's 22, Slovenian. He's from RB Leipzig, and this guy's massive. He is 6'5". It's kind of separated into pros and cons, and maybe say where I think they'll end up. So pros obviously his age profile. At 22, you're sort of paying for potentially 10 years of a guy that can become an elite striker. I don't think he is an elite striker yet, but I'll leave that for the cons. Obviously, with his experience, he's playing in a top 5 league, playing for when you're in that Red Bull setup and you're playing for Leipzig. That is kind of the peak. That is for a young talent to go from Salzburg to Leipzig or Bragantino to Leipzig. That is kind of the peak there before you get your big move. And he's obviously got Champions League experience as well, which clubs will probably be looking at. I've seen him be very impressive against teams like Atletico Madrid. I thought he was quite impressive against when I saw him play against them. This guy's fantastic in the air, which I think more and more teams are taking notice in, and more teams want, is a striker that can handle, be an aerial threat and handle crosses that are being delivered into the box. And he's an incredible ball striker as well, which I think is a quite underrated part of a striker, is can they strike a football, and can he convert chances just purely off his technique alone. And I think he's kind of a striker that can fashion a chance for himself, just strike one sweetly outside the box, and it sails into one of the top corners, which I think is something that clubs probably like as well. I've also got down here, he's very versatile. He can drop deep. This season, he's kind of playing a weird, kind of like a false 9 almost role with a Pender at Leipzig. I think Leipzig have really struggled this year. I'm kind of blended the pros and cons together here, but I think Leipzig have kind of struggled this year, which I think is an explanation for his weird data. Like, he's kind of dropping really deep. You'd think at a club he goes to next, he won't be asked to do that. He'll be asked to sort of get on the end of crosses. The other thing I like about him is that not all of his goals are sort of super reliant on transitions and relying on open space to run into, which I think is always a plus for top clubs. They really, ideally you want someone that can also score goals against a low block or a mid block, or a team that's maybe not letting you get the ball into the box a lot, which I think is an interesting thing as well. Obviously, with his age comes the fact that he's relatively unproven. Obviously, we've only got top level seasons out of him so far. And, 14 goals and 13 goals in consecutive seasons. People are, obviously, when there's other guys on the market, people are always going to compare their numbers, and his numbers aren't as good. And the price is an interesting one, isn't it? So this one is interesting. So there's allegedly a 70 million, it's not release clause, it's a 70 million euro gentleman's agreement that last summer he would be allowed to leave the club this summer if 70 million euros came through the door. That was, sorry, my hair is looking crazy. That was the agreement. Now it looks like Leipzig are kind of backtracking on that, and Bild and Sport Bild are saying that Leipzig would very much like 100 million euros to why is this popping up? Sorry. Saying about my mic input being very high. Okay, let's get rid of that. Where was I? About his, might be some shouting as well. My bad. His potential release clause. Leipzig have sort of said, we want 100 million euros. Sesko obviously won't be very happy with that. And I think that might be the stumbling block with Arsenal as well. Arsenal probably like to pay 70 million euros in that realm. I mean, ideally you'd get him for 50. I think that's sort of a fair price for him. But they obviously want a little bit more than that. Arsenal probably not willing to go too far above that. So the price could get pricey. And obviously, this when I wrote my article on him, I remember thinking that the sounds from the media made it sound like this one was sort of happening soon. I remember thinking about 2 weeks ago, okay, this will get wrapped up quite quick. But it seems to have gone quite cold, which is interesting. I do like Sesko. I do think he's the smartest option on the market. But I could easily see him staying another year at Leipzig. Although obviously no Champions League football next season for him might come into play. might make him try and force a move. Up next, we've sort of got the guy who he has been competing with in the media and amongst fan bases. It's Viktor Gyökeres, of course, 27 years old, Swedish international, plying his trade for Sporting in Portugal this year. A lot of people probably remember him at Coventry. Gyökeres is a really interesting one because his numbers are exceptional. 45 goals in Portugal last season. I've got it written here in my notes. He knows where the net is, which is true. He's a player that whenever you watch him play, if he strikes the ball, it's going to be on target. I think all his underlying stuff is better than, most of his underlying stuff is better than Benjamin Sesko as well. But at 27, he is a guy that if you are buying him, he has to bang in that season that you buy him. It becomes very hard if, for example, Arsenal signed Viktor Gyökeres and he doesn't have a 15-plus league goal season. That can get very difficult, which I think is interesting. That's an interesting idea, and I think that might maybe put Arsenal off him a little bit. It's hard to look for pros for Gyökeres. Like, his technique is okay. Like, I wouldn't say I prefer Sesko's technique of striking a football to Gyökeres's. Not to say he's a bad ball striker. I think he's perfectly fine, but Sesko's is something that I think is a real plus. Obviously, there's been some rumours and a lot of public media back and forth between sort of Gyökeres' camp and Sporting's president. Sounds like Sporting are sort of asking for upwards of 60 million now, which would be a shame because I think the higher that money gets, it's not like a bidding war between clubs where the amount goes through the roof and clubs are still sort of trying to bid at that price because they really believe in the player. It's sort of like, okay, this was a market opportunity because we liked the price. There's no one else really like him on the market or as guaranteed goals as him on the market. As it goes up, I think clubs are kind of like, okay, well, we can kick that down the road. We can go and do something interesting at half that price and it might work. But yeah, I've got more cons for Gyökeres, unfortunately. I think there are always going to be question marks over the quality of the Portuguese league. That's just always going to be a thing. Unfortunately for the Portuguese league, but the quality of the league isn't ideal. Obviously, as we saw Porto lose to Inter Miami at the Club World Cup, and the embarrassment that came from that. It's not a good look for the league, although it's harsh to bash Gyökeres with that. That's not his fault. He wasn't playing. But also a lot of his goals were penalties. I think the number is around sort of 36%. So it's quite a high portion of his goals are penalties as well, which again isn't ideal. And the sort of largest stick to beat him with is that he's really not good in the air. He wins only 1.16 aerials per 90, and that is sort of the bottom 16% of players in Europe. That's the sort of outside the top 5 leagues, so sort of championship players, etc., etc. Belgium League as well will be in there. But that's, I don't know how to feel about that. I think Arteta really would not like that. Because Arsenal have sort of got I keep bringing things back to Arsenal. Maybe Chelsea don't care about that. They're just like, okay, well, we're just going to but although Maresca is his team likes possession of the ball as well, and you're going to face, deep blocks, so maybe for Chelsea it's less of an issue. But for Arsenal, I can imagine that Arteta quite not liking that. We've sort of got this team of massive athletes. And if we then move into Gyökeres, who can't head a football very well, I think he scored something like 4 headers across his time in Portugal, which it's not great, but I think that lack of versatility might work against Gyökeres. Juventus obviously really wanted him. that was in the Italian media, sort of in this week, and it has emerged that Gyökeres, I think they were offering him quite a lot of money. I think, was it 10 million euros? It might have been 13 million euros as a wage over a year, and Gyökeres has apparently rejected that. So I do think he is holding up for the Premier League. But yeah, really interesting player. I think he likes to run into space, which I think is another thing that works against him. If I was Arsenal, I would potentially steer clear, just because I think he doesn't work with what we've already got. But if I'm Liverpool or Chelsea, I'm having a look. But I would also there are some interesting things that I would also be tempted by in the market as well. But speaking of someone who is interesting and holding out for a Premier League move, we've got Victor Osimhen, who I think rounds off the sort of top 3 strikers on the market this summer, who are very clearly in the shop window, I should add. 26, still just 26 years old. When I was researching this, I thought he was older. I don't know why. It's because I can remember him like playing in the Europa League for Napoli. I can remember him at Wolfsburg, which makes me feel old. But yeah, still contracted at Napoli, despite being on loan for Galatasaray last season, where he scored 26 goals. Obviously, again, question marks over the league, although I do think the Turkish league is stronger than the Portuguese league. I've always been sort of pleasantly surprised when I tune into the Turkish league, whereas the few games I've watched of the Portuguese league, I'm like, this looks like a pre-season fixture with the tempo. I have written here best known on the market, question mark, and then I've put in brackets most proven. Yeah, I just think Osimhen, if I was a director of football and I needed a number 9, and these were my options of Sesko, Osimhen and Gyökeres, and I had to just get a guy to score goals, I would get Osimhen. I think he's exceptional in the air. I think he's better than Sesko in the air, and obviously quite clearly better than Gyökeres in the air, which I think is quite big for me as an Arsenal fan, as a sort of someone who's watched Arteta ball. I think that's quite important. His peak age, this is probably his peak. Although I think, I don't know, some would say he's post-peak because that last season at Napoli, but I think you can still get change out of him. With Osimhen, obviously we can talk to the cows come home about how good he is, but again, the cons, his attitude, allegedly his attitude, and his salary is massive. I saw a report from Turkish media while I was researching this. Galatasaray allegedly offer him 18 million euros, and he has a deadline of July 10th to respond. So that's the massive salary. In terms of fee, I think they're still sort of pointing to that. I don't know, it's 50 or 60 million euros that Napoli want, which I think is fine. The fee, I think you don't really pay any mind. This one, I would be, if Arsenal signed Osimhen out of these 3, and you know the wages aren't insane, I would be the most excited for Osimhen out of these 3, because I think he is just a fantastic player. I think he is the finished article. He's the most proven, as I say, although Gyökeres, might be better than him. Who knows? It's really, really hard to judge. Juventus are interested, which is interesting because I think he would be really good at Juve. I think he would be incredible for them. But allegedly holding out for Premier League clubs, as I say, which makes me excited as an Arsenal fan. Although John Obi Mikel is probably somewhere in a dark room, just like with loads of candles around him, trying to bring him to Chelsea, because it feels like he's been manifesting that for years now. Imagine him at Liverpool. I don't think Liverpool will do that just because of his age, and I think while it would be unreal, they probably prefer someone younger. I think Liverpool kind of like Sesko. I think that's. I don't know why I'm whispering like that. They're going to hear me and they're going to do it just because I've said that. I think Liverpool like Sesko. They just need a couple of outgoings to finance it probably and make them cushy with PSR, which probably means they're going to sell some child you've never heard of to Bournemouth for 25 mil, and that'll be enough to do it. But yeah, like I say, I think my final judgment of those 3 is, if you want to be smart and take your medicine on next season as Arsenal, or whoever and say, this guy's going to, he might get 10 plus goals would be nice. Rotating with Havertz or a Jota or a Nicholas Jackson / Liam Delap, bed him in, get some minutes, that sort of thing. I think he'd be fine. Gyökeres I'm the least keen on out of the three, just because I think he's the biggest gamble. And Osman, yeah, I like him, but are his wage demands too crazy? Anything over £200,000 a week, I think, is Arsenal's limit. Chelsea, probably similar now. Liverpool, money bags nowadays. Probably write my blank check, but I don't think they'll do it, as I've said. I've got here some other names to mention. Obviously, Alexander Isak, Newcastle's talisman. Obviously, never going to happen. I think it would take Neymar money. Although there was these reports keep coming about Liverpool. I can't see it happening. I think again it would be a lot of money. Neymar money. You're talking about £200 million. As soon as Newcastle got Champions League football, I remember sitting there watching and thinking, oh no, that's Isak gone. But yeah, I think that ship has sailed for peak Isak now. I think his peak will be spent at Newcastle, which is, he signed the contract, so that's kind of what you get. I've got Vlahovic here as well, just because I watched him play against Wydad, and he came on. He didn't start, and I thought that's interesting. And I read some sort of fan comments about him from Juve fans, and they were kind of like, this guy's so lazy, and I was like, okay, you clearly want a shiny toy. Still their number 9 though. 25 years old. He feels a lot older than that. I'm surprised he's younger than Osman Vlahovic. I remember him being at Fiorentina and being like, oh my god, Arsenal, we need to go get this guy. Famously did reject Arsenal. Of course, he probably regrets that a little bit. Been linked to Milan by Italian media, which I think is a bit boring. Obviously that would be perfect for him. But I think get out of Italy, man. Come to the Prem. Yeah, try to score some goals in the Premier League. I've got Villa with a question mark, because I don't know if Villa actually want a striker. And if they do want a striker, I don't know if they can afford a striker, because Vlahovic is probably asking for a lot of money, which is what I saw Juve fans sort of criticising him for. So he is on big wages. I've also got here Watkins. I don't know if Villa need to sell for PSR reasons, and you'd probably rather sell a Watkins than you would a Morgan Rogers. So, obviously, but he's 29 now. There are a lot of Arsenal fans who really love Watkins. Personally, I like the player. I love Watkins fine, but 29, I just think for the price that Villa will ask for, they're probably going to ask for about £60 million. It's just too much. It doesn't, and that doesn't make sense to me. If I'm a Chelsea, maybe I go to Aston Villa and say, What's Ollie Watkins doing? We can help you out of PSR. We can help you out of PSR just fine, and you can take one of our children that we've sort of snatched from the depths of Brazil for 40 million the other way. That'll be just fine. Or Carney Chukwuemeka, that'll be just fine. They'll probably sort out a deal for that. But I think that kind of defeats the purpose of what Chelsea are trying to do in their sporting. That their kind of sporting model they've got going on, so I don't think that's a possibility. And the last one, he's not really a striker, just wanted to talk about him. It's Marcus Rashford, which at the start of the summer, I feel like I do this every summer, right? If I have like a timeline, this is the start of the summer, this is the end of the summer. My appeal for Marcus Rashford on a transfer to any team is here, sort of low, very low down, and by the end of the summer, it's here. By deadline day, I'm like, give him the number 14 shirt at Arsenal. Like, let's do it. But yeah, allegedly £40 million is what's been rumoured, which is what it would take to get him out of United. I'm just looking at the time. I don't want to keep talking about Rashford. But £40 million, I think he showed promise at Aston Villa on loan. Villa would love him back. Villa are broke, so that is unfortunate for them. I think Rashford really would like to join Barcelona. There's sort of that video been floating around on social media of him sort of speaking to some Barca fans. I think he probably would take a move to Arsenal if that came about. And to be honest, listen, £40 million is steep. I get that for Rashford. If that fee comes down to 35 million, then you're in the realm of saying, okay, well, 35 million, you know, we pay that money, we know what we get, and then the wages are hopefully okay. Hopefully taking a pay cut from 350 grand a week. With United, if they get desperate, will say, okay, well, we'll pay half his wages for his contract or whatever, and then you're kind of like, oh, okay. Now that gets interesting. But I think at 30 million, I mean, at 25, it's a no-brainer for me. I'd quite happily do that. I just think his numbers, his defensive contribution has always been the thing that people are hazy about, and his inconsistencies. But his defensive numbers kind of went through a little purple patch at Villa. I think he was up to like 2.2 tackles per 90 off the top of my head or something like that. I read the other day. I was looking at his stats. I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty good. Like, I just have this like mental image of like Arteta just taking him under his wing and just some like one-on-one training sessions at London Colney, and like, yeah, I don't know if it's just me I have this weird kind of nostalgia and love for Rashford that just makes me throw all my logic out the window and want him to be at Arsenal. Just kind of like another Welbeck. Maybe that's what I've been. Maybe it's this shirt that's making me miss Welbeck and spreading Rashford propaganda. But if all those, Osman, Sesko and Gyökeres are unavailable, I would be all over Rashford if I was Andrea Berta. I actually kind of like him at Chelsea as well. That would be kind of cool, because he can play off the left as well, right? He plays his best football on the left, can play through the middle in a pinch. I don't want to give Chelsea any ideas, because that would actually be really cool to see Rashford at Chelsea as well. Does he feel like a Chelsea player? Maybe. He feels like an Arsenal player to me, but maybe I'm biased. Anyway, enough about Rashford. We are now on to Hot or Not, where we rank transfers in classic Nick fashion. I've only got one transfer this week, partially because there's another really interesting topic I want to end on, which is quite funny as well. And also I knew I'd go over time a little bit on those other options, because as soon as I wrote Rashford down, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to talk about him for ages. And I did. Now, on the Hot or Nots, the one transfer I've got, actual transfer, is Fabrizio Romano reporting that James Trafford to Newcastle is hotting up for £40 million. That fee is incredibly steep, is the one thing that I'm thinking right now. Incredibly steep. Excuse me. I mean, I like it. I don't know if I like it as much as I would. I think there's other players that I would like that a lot more at not as much of a big price. I don't know, actually. Lucas Chevalier from Lille was the one that I thought was a tap-in for Newcastle this summer. I thought that would be something they'd be really interested in. They've pivoted over Trafford, which I get because of he's homegrown. So I think he is probably like, a £20 million player. But homegrown, England under 21, international, everyone thinks he's going to be the guy to take over from Pickford. 40 million is probably what you pay. And obviously, he stays 10 years, 4 million a year. No one's going to, bat an eyelid. Although this does kind of feel to me like death row stuff for Trafford. Like, if you sign for Newcastle, you probably won't ever play for a top 6 club unless you're like a backup or you leave on a free. That's what that feels like to me. So I'm definitely going to put this one in hot, because I think it'd be good. Like, he's a good shot stopper. I have some question marks over him with his feet. Although when he was with Burnley in the Prem, it was the other way around, wasn't it? Everyone was like, oh my God, Muric is like a better shot stopper than him. You don't need any of that woke distribution stuff. And then everyone saw Muric for Ipswich last season. They were like, oh God, what have we done? But Trafford, I think, will be good for Newcastle. Again, on a personal level, he's going to be locked in at Newcastle for a long time. But that's his prerogative. I think 40 million is an overpay, but you need a goalkeeper. I'd do it. Personally, I would have gone for a guy I'm going to write about in a Substack article that's probably going to be out tomorrow now. called Berk Özer. Keep an eye out for him. He is a Turkish goalkeeper who I think clubs should be in the market for this season. This summer, I should say. Although you could get him in January. Actually, maybe not, because it's quite important to his team. But anyway, I want to end on a story. I'm just going to go on my phone so I can get up the direct quote. End on a really funny, not funny for him, but interesting story. This is that the Polish FA have rejected Gareth Southgate, which is a really interesting one. So apparently, obviously, Poland have had their fair share of issues behind the scenes in their national team recently sacked their coach, and are now looking for a new one. And this quote just came off, and this is the head of the Polish FA, and he's been talking to a Polish media outlet. And he said, "We received an offer of his employment." He's talking about Gareth Southgate. "But we must remember the basic issue. No foreign coach will give us a guarantee that we will advance to the World Championship. If he gave us such a guarantee, I would hire him right away." This is a really interesting quote, because he's kind of saying, I don't know if it's saying, Southgate's not good enough, but he says no foreign coach gives us a guarantee. So he's sort of saying, just because you're foreign, we're not going to hire you. Southgate, I don't know why he went for this job. I guess he probably likes international coaching. Probably thought this was at a nice standard. I don't know. I think this is, this is for Southgate. I thought he'd go into club football. I thought he'd come back into club management, and he was sort of trying to raise his stock by being England manager. But again, I think this is really weird decision. I think the Polish FA probably couldn't afford him, because I can't remember what the rumoured wages he was on for England, but that's probably the reason, I would imagine, is that he's probably asked for a lot of money, and they've been like, well, no, because you don't guarantee us getting to the World Cup. And if you don't get to the World Cup as Poland, who are still, you've got competent players there. Lewandowski, I know, is apparently retired from the national team due to that little fallout he had with the previous coach. Kivior, Grabara, you've got decent players there. Matty Cash at right back. You've still got decent players. Piontek, of course, still kicking about. There's a decent base there, so I can see why Southgate maybe wanted that job. But I think just go into club football, man. Just come back to the Premier League. High Championship team actually would be cool. Maybe Everton. Passing of the torch from Moyes to Southgate. Poor Everton fans, they don't deserve that. Although I do like Moyes ball. I think they'll be alright this year. Anyway, I digress. I've gone over my time a little bit. I want to keep this one to half an hour. I've gone over. Anyway, what have I got to plug? Follow me on Blue Sky. I'll put it in the description. Follow me on, subscribe to my Substack. It's free. I'll put that in the description as well. I've got a cool article about Benjamin Sesko I did the other day. And coming up, I've got an article about the NBA Finals, which was last night, and probably why I look so tired. That was ended at 4 a.m, started at 1 a.m, so that was fun. Very, very fun. My first ever NBA game. And I've also got an article coming out soon about 11 players that deserve a transfer this summer. But I'm going kind of niche. Not like Rashford deserves a transfer this summer. I'm going niche. And it's also it literally just hit me that I didn't mention Hugo Ekitike in this. So maybe I should probably write an article about him, because I like him, but he doesn't deserve a whole podcast episode all to himself. But that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.